Hi, it's Jan Beta, and today I'm going to try to restore and resurrect, hopefully, a Commodore 64 that was stored in a flooded basement. And here's the poor thing. The thumbnail picture is actually not clickbait at all. That's exactly how this looked after the flood. It was just washed shortly after the picture was taken with a garden hose to get the worst mud off. It is in a pretty poor state. The flooding happened around 2 years ago, and I've restored several computers from that very basement already in previous videos. This one I kind of forgot about until now, and it was sitting here dry as it was. I have not opened this yet, so probably we're in for a surprise. I hope it didn't rot away while it was stored here in a little cardboard box. Also, there's two cartridges. One seems to be the Magic Formel, which is kind of a fast loader expansion cartridge, I believe. And Simon's Basic, which is a pretty nice basic expansion cartridge that's very well known. The person whose basement was flooded doesn't want to be named, so I'm not going to do that. Just want to say thank you for trusting me with all these computers and letting me do the restorations. I hope this is going to be interesting. There's going to be a lot of washing of parts involved, and hopefully the mainboard in here isn't damaged to an extent that I can't resurrect it. Maybe we're going to have to do some rework on that as well. Mostly we're going to be concerned with washing the mud and debris off this. So let me put on some gloves and dig in, quite literally. Let's open this up and see what it looks like inside. As you've seen in the thumbnail picture, this was completely encrusted in dirt and completely wet. So water dripped on this from above. I don't think it was underwater actually, but it got all the dirt rained on this basically through the ceiling of the basement. I'm going to have to take all of this apart. The keyboard assembly has to come apart completely. We're going to fully disassemble this, clean all the plastic parts, clean the circuit boards in here, and see if we can resurrect this. Hopefully I'm going to be able to make this work again, because it is a Commodore 64 Breadbin that hasn't been tinkered with, at least not from the outside appearance, so it's in pretty good shape actually, apart from the fact that it's completely dirty. So let's take it apart, take a look at the circuit board, and fingers crossed we can make this work. This one is a PAL Commodore 64, I can see that from the label already. WGA usually means made in Germany, and that's what it says on the label too. And it's yeah, not an early revision or anything like that, so probably there's a regular long board, main board in here. Nothing special about that, apart from the fact that it's pretty dirty probably and rusty. So let's open this up. Okay, it's dirty, but I guess the cardboard protected the mainboard to some extent at least. Carefully removing this. And this is an old school Commodore 64. Assembly number 250407. It has MT RAM, I can already see that. So maybe we're going to have to replace some RAM chips in here, because these commonly break. Yeah, it is quite encrusted in dirt, especially the area in the back here. So yeah, we're going to have to take this apart and give this a very good cleaning. There's not a lot of rust happening here. Some rust is happening here. This stuff is pretty resilient. That's like real dirt from the ground and from the building. I can also see that the kernel ROM is socketed with kind of a cut socket, so that's not the best way to do it. Probably I'm going to put a proper socket in there. The date codes on the chips that are soldered to the board are from 24th week, 84, 25th week. So this is from mid-1984, very likely. I also want to pop the lid of the VIC-2 compartment. The graphics chip is in here, allegedly. Yep, there it is. And that's super clean in there. That's good. I'm going to take the board out of the casing and then we're going to give this a good clean with some water and some alcohol. You've seen me doing this a couple of times now, I guess. Usually I just wash these boards in the sink and get away with that. So this should now come out, I think. Yep. And the bottom side of the board has some rust and some solder residue here on the socket where the kernel ROM was socketed. Probably this had some kind of fast loader ROM in there at some point. It doesn't look bad actually, so it's completely fixable. We're just going to have to clean this thoroughly. Let me briefly interrupt this program with a message from my sponsor for this video, which is PCBWay, my favorite manufacturer of prototype PCBs of all kinds. They also do CNC machining, 3D printing, sheet metal fabrication. They can populate your boards for you. So if you want a circuit board made, I highly recommend checking out the link in the video description, PCBWay.com. Back to the Commodore 64 restoration efforts. I think the first step should be to take care of the board, and I'm going to soak the case parts in some soapy water while I take care of the board and try to resurrect that. In the end, hopefully we're going to have a completely shiny and working Commodore 64. Let's wash things at first. And I think I want to get rid of the shielding altogether, because that's what I usually do. I'm still going to give this a wipe and keep it. Let's get the keyboard out of here and then work on that separately. So this should now come out, and yeah, there's quite a bit of dirt in there, as you would expect. Also going to remove the LED here, which is just clamped in with this ring we can lift, and then there's the LED holder that clips into the case that we should be able to remove. Removing the LED. I'm going to remove all the keycaps and put them into some soapy water in this container, and I'm going to put all the metal parts, the springs underneath the keys, in this little container here to wash them separately and probably apply some WD-40 to them, because some of them might be rusted. The keycaps definitely need a good soak. And the whole assembly has to come apart as well. So we're going to have to remove all these screws in the back and also desolder the shift lock key here, which is a special construction, as you can see. This is a latching key. And then we can clean all the plastic and metal parts individually, which we're going to be very careful with, obviously, because these plastics are old, from 1984. And we don't want to damage anything. That's why I used a keycap puller, which is the best way to get these keycaps off in one piece without risking breaking them. So I'm going to desolder this. There's two contacts on the shift lock. Just pulling these two wires out here, and we should be able to take the whole thing out. Yep. That's our shift lock key mechanism. Now all these little screws have to come out, and we're going to be able to take the circuit board out of this, and also the plungers, the little contacts or switches that close the contacts on the circuit board. We're going to see. Some of the screws are under this tape, and I'm just going to cut little holes into to get to the screws. Now the whole circuit board lifts out, I think. Yes. And it is a bit dusty, but looks in rather nice condition otherwise. You can see these carbon contacts here, those are actuated by these rubber or silicon switches. So These push on these and close the contacts, and then the signals are transported via this cable. That's how these keyboards work. So this just needs a wipe with a damp cloth. I think you want to be careful with the carbon printed contacts on there. They easily rub off, so we don't want to use anything too aggressive. And these things are all going to be cleaned individually as well. And there we go. That's our plastic part and all our plungers separated, and also the circuit board. I'm also going to remove the cartridges from their shells to soak the shells with the other plastic parts. There's a little screw on this one, and then it should separate. There we go. Okay, it doesn't look half bad from the inside. This sticker is just cut out from a magazine, it seems. Interesting. There we go. Okay, this has an EEPROM in it, with the sticker coming off the EEPROM. So maybe we don't have anything in here. Maybe the data is erased. That's quite interesting. There's a lot in here. I'm not sure what this cartridge actually does. We're going to have a closer look at this later. So all the plastic parts are just going to get a treatment with some water in my shower here. Some dish soap and some window cleaner and some good scrubbing. So these can soak for a good while. We're going to do the same treatment with the keycaps, basically. And we're going to let these soak for some hours, I suppose, as well, because they are so dirty. So yeah, let's take a look at the circuit board, or circuit boards, plural. I'm going to remove the socketed chips from all of these, I think, and then wash them in the sink. I think I also want to desolder this RF-Modulator can, because that has some rust underneath. I can already see that. So our SID, our VIC chip. We're going to wash these individually. And there's also another couple of chips that have been replaced in here. So we're going to remove these as well. I'm going to try to desolder the RF-Modulator can, I think. So this is held in with some twisted tabs here. Sometimes these are also soldered, not on this one, thankfully. I'm just going to twist these so we can remove it. We have to desolder these pins here and these, I believe. Yeah, there's been some rework. Maybe this didn't have a picture output at some point. So some rework around the graphics circuitry, it seems. Maybe this is a broken C64. In this state it probably is, but maybe it was broken before it got into the flood. And there we go. I think that might be it. Yay! Okay, this is rusted. And also underneath, as I suspected. I'm also going to remove this socket construction here, which is quite at an angle and not very good. So this is going to have to go and is going to be replaced with a proper socket. First one is out! Yeah! And the second one also comes out nicely. Okay. I also removed the ICs from the sockets in the Magic Formal cartridge, and there's actually smaller logic chips underneath this larger chip. That's quite interesting also here. They had to take all the room that there is in a cartridge, it seems. Pretty interesting. So yeah, hope we can get this to work and take a look at it. So these are all going to be cleaned in the sink in the kitchen with some tap water and some alcohol afterwards. I think I want to work on the RF modulator separately. So just going to wash these with some dish soap and brush and some warm water. And I'm rinsing this with alcohol thoroughly and then let it dry. So these are just going to dry. I put them so that the water and alcohol can drip out of the sockets and of the connectors for the most part. So hopefully we're going to end up with something that is clean and reworkable and resurrectable. Okay, time to scrub the case parts and the keycaps. Always fun to clean each individual keycap. Now we're going to let them dry, and also same for the case parts. It's totally going to be worth it in the end, hopefully. So I'm also going to clean the ICs I removed from the boards, and I'm just going to use alcohol and cloth to not risk any water leaking into those, but this should be okay. Grounded myself, and the work surface here is also grounded. So we shouldn't have any issues with electrostatical discharge and such, hopefully. I'm going to put a new sticker on the EEPROM as well, just in case. But usually it takes a long time for these to be erased accidentally, so I'm not too worried about that actually. Just a bit of electrical tape over the EEPROM, or over the window in the EEPROM. That should protect it from UV. I'm also going to give very similar treatment to the RF modulator can and to the lid from the VIC-2 compartment, the graphics compartment. We're going to have to desolder the lid from this one. There's a bit of surface rust under here that we can probably pretty easily remove. Also cleaning the LED a bit while we're at it. Shift lock key as well. I'm just going to flood this with alcohol and move it a bit. That should clean the switch inside as well. So not going to bother taking these apart because it's probably going to be fine. Don't feel any sand in there or anything like that. So the contacts are very likely okay. I set this multimeter to continuity testing mode, and we're going to see if our switch still works, which it does. So yeah, no worries there, as I suspected. Let's remove the lid from the RF modulator can here. There we go, that's it. Now we should be able to open this up. Okay, and there's a bit of rust in there, but nothing we can't clean out. And I guess I'm also going to replace the capacitors in here right away while I'm at it. The lid is actually soldered to this can here, so you need quite a bit of heat to get that off. This should turn out pretty nicely in the end. And I am going to replace the capacitors straight away, because once I have this closed up again, it won't be too easy to get to those. While I'm at it, I'm also going to give the keyboard circuit board a bit of a quick wipe with alcohol. Careful not to damage the carbon pads on there, but usually alcohol is not dissolving them or anything like that. You just don't want to go with anything more aggressive. And usually what I do is to clean these circuit boards and then use some non-corrosive contact cleaner on those contacts as well. I'm going to have to clean the cable as well, because that's super dirty. So that's our keyboard PCB cleaned. We need to clean the plungers and the metal parts as well. So our metal parts here are just going to get a quick wipe with alcohol, and I'm going to wipe them with a microfiber cloth and then store them in this container and spray some WD-40 on them, which usually prevents them from rotting away any further. I'm just going to spray all of them with alcohol, and then I'm going to wipe them all off individually, which usually works pretty well. And it takes quite some time if you want to do this properly, which I always want to do with these old machines. So I'm not going to bore you with this whole process. I'm just going to do each and every single spring here. So I wiped all the screws and the springs and the other little small metal parts. And now I'm going to soak them in a bit of WD-40, which usually works pretty well. You just don't want to leave too much on there. So I'm using a towel here, putting this stuff in here, and then giving it a light spray with just standard WD-40. Don't want any of this stuff leaking into your circuitry or anything like that, but this usually works well. I've done that a couple of times now. And as for the little plungers, I'm going to wipe them down with alcohol as well. Just going to spray these with some alcohol and quickly wipe them. And the contacts are on the bottom here, so they should have a little bit of an extra wipe. So yeah, I'm going to go through each one of these and then I'll report back. Okay, all shiny and clean. That was fun, but worth it. And while I'm waiting for the main board to completely dry, let me just replace the capacitors in this RF-Modulator can quickly, which should be not a big deal. You sometimes need low profile capacitors for these things to be able to close the lid. And as usual, I'm going to put the capacitor values in the video description just in case you have the same RF-Modulator can in your C64. Sometimes you have to be a bit creative with bending components out of the way and things like that to be able to close the lid again. Don't have low profile capacitors for this. So I'm bending them out of the way basically, but that's working fine usually. This is a single-sided circuit board, so super easy to work on. Yeah, and I don't want to close this completely at this point because we don't know if it works, but I'm going to put the lid on just without soldering the little tab on it. And then we're going to have to wait for the circuit board to dry before we can work on that. So for you, it's just going to be an edit. For me, it's a couple of hours of waiting. Fun. Maybe I'll eat something. So it's a couple of hours later and the board is dry. I did some initial cleaning with some Q-tips and some alcohol and some contact cleaner. And this is pretty much the best I can get this. There's still some remnants of dirt around the connectors and things like that, but it looks pretty much clean at this point. So we're going to try to make this work again. And of course we're going to have to put the RF modulator back in there, and I'm going to put a new socket in this position where the shoddy replacement socket was made out of two headers there. That's the first steps I'm going to take, and then we're going to see if this boots up or if we are going to have to do some more repair work. I say we, but of course I mean I'm doing the work and you are watching and maybe guessing what the fault is. If there is any fault, we don't know yet. So I'm putting the socket in here. So put a new socket in for the kernel ROM, proper socket, dual wipe, so it grabs the chip from both sides and should be way better than what was in here before. And as is tradition on this channel, I'm going to sign the spot where the RF modulator goes. And then solder it back in. And I checked the traces under the components I'm soldering in now visually, so there don't seem to be any broken ones, so we're probably going to be fine. So ideally that should be all the soldering we have to do on this board. We're going to find that out shortly. So I'm putting all the ICs back into their positions, spraying some contact cleaner into the sockets before I do that, just to be sure they make good contact. They look perfectly clean. I'm not going to put the SID in just yet because the system starts up without the SID, just without sound basically. And I don't want to risk damaging that in case there's something else wrong here. That one goes there. That goes here. I want to make sure that all these chips are in here snugly. And then we're going to put power to this and connect it to the monitor. Ideally, this is just going to power up to a normal startup screen, blue basic screen. But I kind of doubt it. Let's see, fingers crossed anyway. Ooh, that looks kind of funky. It is powering up and we have kind of a picture, but it's red instead of blue. So that's not correct. But it also detects our video signal as SECAM, which is not at all what this should be. This should be a PAL C64. SECAM is like the French, I believe, video standard, which is definitely not the correct video standard for that. Maybe it's just a twist of a little potentiometer. I should probably check the voltages as the very first thing I do, so we don't risk damaging this whole system. Oh yeah, the battery is dead on my multimeter. Hang on! I'm going to use another multimeter. So we should have 5 volts DC here, which we do. This one even shows me 4.98, which is perfectly fine. We should have around 9 volts here, 9.9, which is perfectly fine. The voltage supply to the chips, to the board seems to be alright, that's good. There's 2 more voltage supplies here. One is a 7805, that's this one, and one is the 7812, which is this one here. And we should have 5 volts on the output of the 7805, because it's a 5 volt linear regulator, and that's 5.08, that's 07, that's perfectly normal, and we should have 12 volts on this one, 12.2. That's perfectly normal as well. So our voltage supply is good. So let's see if we can change the picture with twisting this little potentiometer here. That would be my first guess. There's something wrong with the video signal interpretation there. So let's twist that and see if we get a change. Maybe that got dirty. So we definitely get the picture changing there. But basically we get a black and white picture or the red picture we've seen. So something's wrong with the color information. And we also got these stripes, which are not at all normal. This might just be a broken VIC-2. I think I want to check this VIC-2 chip in another C64 before I do anything else. That might just be the problem here. So I got out my test C64 and that does actually work as expected. So I'm going to put the VIC chip from the one we're working on in here and see if that works in here. Let's see. Oh yeah, that's pretty much not the best behavior from a VIC-2. So we might just have a broken VIC-2. This looks different than on the other one, but it also seems to be a questionable result in a C64 that is working. So I'm just going to write a question mark on this VIC-2 and put the working one into our board that we're working on. Let's see if that does anything with that. Okay, fingers crossed. I put the working VIC-2 in here. That's better. Okay, that wasn't a very difficult fix. Let's see if this fully works. Let's just run some tests on it and things like that. I'm also going to put the SID chip back in, I think, at this point. Maybe that works as well. I'm just going to put a test cartridge in here, a test harness, and see if everything works as expected. Actually, this might be the first time I use my self-made combined diagnostic and dead test cartridge that I made a video about making, where I also explain a bit about what the difference between the diagnostics and the dead test cartridge is. We're going to run the dead test at first and see if our C64 here passes all the tests. Looking good so far. Even the RAM seems to test good so far, which would be super unusual given that there are MT RAM chips in here, which usually are faulty. That's super promising. Maybe we just had a broken VIC-2. Let's see if the SID sound output works. Yeah, it passed all the tests. This seems to be a fully working C64 board. Nice. I am also going to run the diagnostics with my diagnostic harness with this to see if all the ports work as expected. But this is super promising already. So it was just a broken VIC-2 chip in there. And this should test all the ports as well with all the harness stuff inserted there. So this is kind of a more in-depth test of the C64. That passes all the tests. That is super promising. So we have a working C64 here. The only thing that was faulty was the VIC-2, and that is definitely a faulty chip, as we've seen in the otherwise working board. So the only thing we changed was the VIC-2, and that gave us a similar behavior to what we had on this Commodore 64, so the other stuff seems to work fine, as you can see. In order to make this a full restoration, now that we got this working, I am going to replace all the electrolytic capacitors on the board. I'm also going to replace the voltage regulators and put heat sinks on the chips that run rather warm in regular use. I've done videos about this, so I'm just going to show you a quick montage of me doing it. And if you are interested in how to pull this off, you can watch one of my other videos that I'm going to link in this video and in the video description. So let's go! So that's all the capacitors replaced with proper 105 degrees Celsius rated ones. I didn't go with my usual Panasonic brand caps, but these should all be okay brand, and they're all 105 degrees Celsius rated. That means they usually have a longer lifespan than the ones that are only rated for 85 degrees. So all of these are the same values as the original ones. I even found some low profile ones for this RF modulator can, even though I'm probably not going to close the lid again on that. I am going to solder a blob of solder into this can because it works. I also replaced the 7805 and the 7812 with 78S05 and 78S12, which are rated for higher current. I'm also going to apply heat sinks to the VIC2, the SID chip and the PLA, which are the ones that run the hottest in these systems usually. So yeah, I'm just going to use thermal adhesive and some nice heat sinks and put them on there. I also managed to melt the side of this joystick connector. Didn't pay enough attention when I soldered in these caps, I think. Yeah, but that's not going to be any functional disadvantage. It's just an optical flaw. So that's my heat sinks on. Now we're just going to wait for the glue to settle. You can of course also put heat sinks on some of the other chips, but these are the ones that run the hottest usually, so it's a good idea to get some on those. Now it's just a matter of waiting for the glue to fully settle, and then we can put the whole thing back together. It's a good idea to let this sit overnight, I think, and the case parts should be fully dry before we reassemble, so see you in the morning. Well, good morning! The glue has settled and I actually played some games and checked some demos on this system, and it seems to work absolutely no problems. So that's good news. And I guess it is going to be time to reassemble this after I maybe play another round of Galencia. And I'm going to start with the keyboard. Just giving this another wipe with some alcohol and a microfiber cloth, so we can be sure that it's completely dirt-free. I want to make sure that this is absolutely meticulously clean. So we are going to have to put all these key stamps or plungers back into this side of the board, and usually I just prop it up a little. I'm just going to use the cartridges that I have lying around here. Yeah, and then it's basically just a matter of putting all the little plungers in their positions, which is always fun and requires some patience. I also just remembered to put the shift lock key in there from the other side, from the top side of this keyboard assembly. Don't forget that. And that's the final one. There we go. All the plungers are back in place. And now the circuit board goes back on here from the back side, like so. And we're going to put the screws in quickly so we don't risk losing all the plungers. I'm always turning these counterclockwise for a bit before I screw them fully down to not damage the plastic unnecessarily, because all this stuff is going to be brittle. So just getting all of these back in, and then we can resolder the shift lock key and work on the keycaps on the other side. Now it's time to put all the keycaps back on, and there's actually a spring under each of these keycaps. These are the ones, the regular ones, that are under every keycap except for the spacebar, which has a spring with a slightly different tension to make it more springy. So this requires more force and looks a bit different than the other ones. But that's only the one for the spacebar. The other ones are all exactly the same. So let's put the keycaps back on, which actually turned out super nicely. They look as good as new nearly. And I set another C64 up in the background here to get the keys in the correct spots. So let's do it. Okay, I think that was worth the effort. It looks like a nearly completely new keyboard. There's some slight yellowing on the white parts on the keys, but it's barely noticeable. So yeah, super happy with this. The case parts turned out nicely, although there's a bit of discoloration here. And they are also slightly yellowed. Maybe you can see it here. There's this slightly brighter spot. Yeah, but it's nothing to worry too much about. I'm just going to try to get rid of these spots or marks with a magic eraser sponge and some alcohol. Yeah, actually coming off. So I'm just going to work on that for a bit and just see if we can get this to its original shine again. And then clean off the marks that the eraser sponge leaves, which is the white discoloration we've seen. Just using a microfiber cloth here. It should come out rather immaculate. Yeah, pretty nice. There's no broken off screw posts on here. This one is a bit damaged, but they're all still intact, which is rare on these C64s, so super happy. This is such a nice specimen. These magic sponges are really useful for these kinds of restorations usually, so it makes things a lot easier. Yeah, now we can remove the dust. Yeah, I think that's about the best I can get this. And regarding these labels on the machines, they are usually rather resilient, so you can just put them into soapy water and nothing is going to happen to these. Same for the Commodore logo and the power badge here. One last thing before I put the mainboard back in. You can clean these edge connectors with a pencil eraser quite easily and effectively. So usually you just wipe them a bit with these and get the dirt off there quite easily. And these are not easy to clean otherwise, so this is the way to go. And of course you have to get rid of the eraser debris. I'm using alcohol for that. And of course you also want to do the other side because these are double-sided connectors. I also cleaned the cartridge port repeatedly by spraying contact cleaner into that and inserting cartridges and wiggling them around a bit. These should be as clean as they can be. There's some scratches in this case, but nothing to worry about too much. That's our keyboard in. It looks magnificent. And as I said, I'm going to get rid of the RF shielding because that just prevents the heat from getting out. And into the bottom case it goes. And then we screw it down. Yay! That fits rather nicely. That also still fits. It's actually rare you see a completely intact Commodore 64 case, but this one is. And there we go, resurrected Breadbin. Just going to put the case screws back in here. And then it's time for a bit of testing. Last screw. There we go. A refurbished Commodore 64 back in business. Hopefully we're going to test that now. I nearly forgot about the cartridges that I also cleaned. I'm going to do the same pencil eraser trick on these edge connectors on these. Of course, I'm going to put the chips back in on this one. And they should be functional again, hopefully. Okay, that's back together. Let's test the C64 with the cartridges, maybe. Okay, C64 without any cartridge. Power LED comes on, and we have our screen. Keyboard seems to work flawlessly. Okay, let's try the cartridges. Possibly have to clean the cartridge port some more. No, there we go. This is the basic expansion, so we have quite some nice commands for graphics and sound and things like that, and it's relatively easy to program. I actually owned one of these cartridges back in the day and had a lot of fun programming. It's way easier than Commodore Basic version 2, which is the standard BASIC that's built into the Commodore 64. Simon's Basic is way more sophisticated, kind of like more like BBC Basic or something like that. It is still compatible with the Commodore Basic, but you have extra commands for things like sound and graphics. So that's pretty nice to have. I didn't have this before, so now I have one back and it appears to be working and it looks kind of like new. Let's see what the other cartridge does. I'm quite curious because I've never seen one of these. Ooh, Magic Formal. So it seems we have this working as well. 1987 version 1.2 of Magic Formal. Don't know what it does. There's Magic Basic. There's some... You should be able to press the function keys. Magic Basic. Okay, this is Magic Basic. No idea what that does. Probably fast loader, basic expansion. I'm going to have to read up on that. But it seems to be a RAM expansion also, 72K RAM. That's pretty neat. 84K ROM, so there's a lot of ROM space on there as well. So not sure what this cartridge can do, but it looks pretty useful actually. So I am going to play around with that for a bit. Yeah, another C64, fully refurbished, cleaned. Hopefully good for another couple of years at least of entertainment. I am super happy with the results and hope you liked this video. Thank you very much for subscribing to this channel, for your comments and your thumbs, and extra super special thanks to all the people that support me on Patreon and on the channel memberships page here on YouTube, and also on Ko-fi and elsewhere. If you want to give me some support, the links are in the video description. Hope to see you again on this channel. I'm Jan Beta. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye!